Hey guys, my name is Alex Barham. While I was doing this Waka review and leading up to it, I got a ton of questions about the construction of Waka and their outfitting. You know, it's something where we hear a lot about Waka boats, we see them being paddled a lot, but a lot of people just have a ton of questions about them, especially in the States where they're incredibly hard to come by, especially on the East Coast. Really, you go on their website, there's a written description, you can kind of see from the photos that there is outfitting, but beyond the fact that there's plastic thigh hooks, there's really nothing that you can discern from the photos. So we've all heard kind of rumors about this and that. Let's dive in, look at this, and compare it to other major manufacturers that we're more familiar with. So the first question most people seem to have is, how's the plastic? Well, I think a lot of people have heard kind of horror stories about pitons, and honestly, I've seen horror stories, heard horror stories from basically every manufacturer with few exceptions. And let's just for a second take a look at the thickness of the plastic, because that's really the only thing that we can measure in comparison to. Obviously, there's a huge difference between how it's cooked, who's cooking it, and what the actual raw material is, but a lot of it does come down to how much you put in the boat. So we're gonna look right here at the cockpit rim area. This is one of the places where it is the hardest to get plastic to get uniformly and in the correct thickness. And if you've ever cut a boat apart, you'll know that this, for example, is a hull section of a Shiva. This, you can see right here, is the edge of the cockpit rim. So there's quite a difference in the amount of plastic in these two pieces. If we call this apples to apples, you can see that there's pretty much the same amount of plastic. There's maybe a little more in the Piranha. By the same token, here's a chunk of dagger from roughly the same area. And yeah, we're basically all making the same thickness. Never really felt that this boat wasn't thick enough or sturdy enough, and it's not disturbingly light. So I really don't put any stock into that. The next major component that a lot of people ask about is the seat. Now, I've heard vaguely that there is some difference in where the boat's manufactured, that you might actually get different seats. If you know the specifics for that, comment below, but I'm just gonna work with what I've got here. So usually there is a factory, more professional pad. The person who lent me this boat pulled that out, preferred this. Honestly, either way, it's basically a mini cell, so absolutely fine. It's comfortable, and the biggest thing is it has a huge area of support. It's a true hollow roto-molded seat. It makes the boat super stiff, and it's not really heavy. So those are the biggest things. By comparison, at times, and what I was kind of expecting to see in this boat is a single layer seat like this. So even though you could say this is roto-molded because they actually make two at the same time and then buzz it in half, this, which is out of an original 9R, is super light, but it's not nearly as good at giving you hull stiffness as what's in this, a Liquid Logic, a Dagger. So yeah, completely fine with the seat. In terms of functionality and gear storage, I came to absolutely love the way that this is built. It is so easy to securely toss a rope in, get it back out. Pelican case will fit in here. In this case, hip shims. Absolutely adored it. It would have been cool if there was like some sort of mesh there over the top or clips, but super functional as it is. Let's move to the backband. 90% of the time, a backband is a backband is a backband. There's a couple exceptions, but I did, for what it's worth, really like this thing. The biggest thing is that they're reliable. The ratchets are solid, all that stuff. And yes, they're using the same basic ratchets as Dagger, they're bomber, the ladders work great, never slipped, never a pain to get out, always good. The one thing I didn't like about these is that they're using the old style Wave Sport ladders. The idea behind these ladders is that the strap goes through here, back here, and can be adjusted. The reality that I know Wave Sport figured out, and I think Waka is kind of learning the hard way, is that while these friction grabs are very effective for static loads, like say a backpack or something like that, The boating application, where it's going to vibrate all the way to the river and then be tensed and untensed and tensed and untensed, it tends to let the strap go, especially if it's not the right material. So back in the wave sport days, like if you find like an old Project 52, 56, you'll probably see that this is either knotted like I've done on the side of the river, or somebody's gone through and fully replaced it with an NRS strap, because those grab versus these which don't, just because it's a slicker material and it's a little thinner. Once you get this fixed, it's fine. But when I first got this boat, I was constantly blowing the backband out, and it was a problem. The hip pads are another little story. So there are some things that I really like about this. For example, they are riveted in 4 points. So there's no strap going around the back that you're trying to tighten on the side of the river or any of that nonsense. In terms of the actual adjustment, you pull this top back, jam a pad in, and it loops around like this. Very nice for quick adjustments on the side of the river if you're demoing it out to a friend or something like that. But because of its narrow shape and your inability to adjust it up and down, it's not the most comfortable thing ever. I wound up, because this seat is oddly tight for a boat of this size, actually kind of not using hip pads and just kind of getting away without it. But when I did need them, I put them in, and they worked, but they weren't comfortable. Now, in my case, I found that these were incredibly comfortable, incredibly high performance, super functional, loved everything about them. But if the backband is a little sketchy, which it was in the beginning, if you don't have forward pressure into this boat to really utilize the knee pocket, you've got nothing. So it really is incumbent on you to make sure that the rest of the boat is solid, because unlike a traditional thigh hook where you're putting it centered on your knee so you can kind of pull from the front and the back on it, you are fully committed with these thigh hooks to the thighs. And if you slide back, you really don't have any connection on any part of the boat anymore. Let's talk about some of the safety features. So first of all, this boat, for whatever reason, has a mix of hard points. My two right behind the paddler points are the older RPM style, which is tubular webbing with surgical tubing inside. You know, they're not anyone's favorite, but they definitely do work. The concern that I always have with these is that, yes, you, to pull one of these out, have to pull 4 layers of webbing over the top of a washer. But I think there's just no question that Piranha really figured this out better with these soft grab handles. So same tubular webbing, same surgical tubing inside, but with solid mounting plates, and everything is stitched. So this is just a much stronger system. But, you know, again, these are time tested and proven, and they're so easy to fix and replace if you're stuck somewhere. So I really can't argue a ton with these, even if they're not my favorite. Moving on to the hard grab points, one of the things that really surprised me about these my first day out with them is that they are plastic. They actually flex under minimal hand pressure. So by comparison, digging through my parts pile, here we have a Wave Sport, Dagger, and a Piranha handle. These are all metal, billet aluminum, milled out. And here, right off the bat, I emailed Waka about these, and EG said the team hasn't had to be extracted out of one of these boats. So we haven't really tested these in a pin situation, but they seem bomber. I have seen them break though and get warrantied over a full boat impacting on a hard point and snapping these, which I've never heard of happening to an aluminum one. And right off the bat, maybe more concerned than less concerned. So he recommended I email Kenny, which I did, and he sent me this video, which I'll play now. So This is a bench vise where he is bending one of these plastic things back and forth and back and forth. And by the end of it, you can actually see that the plastic is starting to fail. The idea, as Kenny put it in his email, was that their theory is that the boat will be stronger if, unlike a metal hardpoint, which cannot deform and will instead deform the plastic where it is bolted, the bar is able to deform and balance the load across both sides. That is the basic premise behind these Piranha ones with the plates we were talking about earlier. And they're designed to do that. The problem that I have is when asked if they had done a comparison test to other styles of aluminum bars, and I gave them this video where Liquid Logic broke theirs at 2,800 pounds, Kenny said, yes, we do those tests, but wouldn't give me numbers and sent me that first bench vise video again. Look, you can feel however you want about this, but here's my thing. At the end of the day, there's no washers on these bolts. So you're not actually relying on the strength of this plastic, whether or not you trust it. You're relying on the amount of plastic that's trapped underneath the head of that bolt. And that is just a minuscule amount all the way around. There is not much meat holding that thing in. You know what? Let's take a look at it. Now, the really good news here is that they are doing this the right way at the factory in terms of how these are mounted. These are not relying on a washer on the back. They have the brass insert, so when you're pulling this, you're not just pulling a washer through that's going to deform, you're actually pulling all the plastic with it. But again, here's this bar that you can bend back and forth. And if you look at the hole, I can actually already see under the light where it is deformed just from being installed and being pulled on to drag the boat around and tie it to the roof. Here's what I'm talking about. This minuscule amount of plastic on the head of this nut, that's what is holding it in place. That's not a lot of plastic to be relying on. I don't want to bash on this a lot more than I already have, but yeah, I've talked to other people in the industry who work and make boats, and it's definitely something that bothers more than just me. But for big water, if you're not actually ever expecting to pin this boat, I think these are fine to hold your boat to your car. I've seen these bend in the real world from a horrible pin, and yeah, I just know that this wouldn't do it. I don't know how else to say it. So as I pull this boat apart to get to the foot block, I just want to point out front pillar, super, super solid, really nice high density foam, and a bracket to hold it in place. Absolutely nothing to complain about. Totally bomber. It goes deep into the seat with that slot. So good job. The other thing though I wanted to point out real quick, which I forgot to mention before, is you only get 3 positions stock to place your seat. Now if you wanted to, I don't think there's anything stopping you popping a hole front or back from that and giving yourself 5. Personally though, I never move the seat in most of my boats anyway, so this absolutely doesn't bother me. Let's have a look at the foot block. This is the business end of the Waka foot block. There are some really cool things about it. If you look here, there are 3 nuts and then 3 holes. This gives you quite a few options in terms of mounting up the width of your foot block. Cool idea, I like it. It's otherwise very sturdy, well built, and I really like the tightness of the holes and the wide width for the front to back adjustment. Now,
Here's the problem. The problem is, the other really big thing about a foot block is that it makes sure that in the event of a piton, you can't slip your foot past and shatter it. Because if you have a shattered foot up here, you can be completely locked into your boat, unable to get out. And not only is it an injury hazard, it's a drowning hazard. So usually the standard front foot block looks something like this. This, for example, came out of a Piranha. I think it was the 9R. You have the metal bars coming back with the adjustments, a rotomolded piece up front, and then they give you a sheet of foam which goes all the way around, and you cut down the diameter, so it's a nice tight fit. There's no way that you can get a toe around on any side. So again, if you piton, that's something that you're not going to get without that foam there. Just for reference, this is the dagger system. So these plates slide out to fill as much of the boat as possible, and then you have shaped foam to go in there. Do you need something this fancy? No. The traditional style with just a big block of foam and a rotomolded base is absolutely fine, but this is what we're currently competing with in the market.
So there you have it. There's a look at the different facets that make up the construction of this boat, and sort of the good, the bad, and the ugly. What do I think personally? Well, it's a great product. The boat paddle is amazing, but there were moments like rolling into Alpine where if you're a little left, you are pitoning and you are pinning, where it was disconcerting. If something goes wrong there, it's really going to go wrong. Same with knife's edge. If something goes wrong there, my life could depend on the Hardpoints. Did I run the stuff? Absolutely. But it's in the back of your head, you know, is this stuff really tested? If we were looking at rock climbing or something like that, there's no rock climbing company that's going to put out a carabiner that isn't tested and rated. Maybe that's what we need to do as an industry, is start rating these Hardpoints. I don't know, but it's food for thought. I hope that these are things that we see improvements of over with the next couple of years. Waka's still a really young company, but we'll see. Make your own decision and have a good one.